Welcome to the Investigators Roundtable, where I, your host of Real Life PI, will interview leaders in the private investigations and private security industries. We'll be discussing things such as business strategy, tips and tricks for newbies, and going over some memorable cases that we have worked. My goal with this podcast is to create a virtual space for industry professionals to come together and to collaborate, as well as to pull back the curtain so that you, the audience, can see behind the scenes in what is sometimes a mysterious and misunderstood profession. I'm your host, Amanda Appy of Immaculate Investigations, LLC, located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. For more information on me or my company, you can go to southcarolinadetectiveagency.com. I hope you enjoy this episode, and thanks so much for listening. This episode of the Investigators Roundtable is sponsored by ImmaculateMerch.com, merchandise inspired by life as a private investigator. As a way to say thank you, we are giving 20% off for podcast listeners with coupon code THANKYOU20. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy this podcast. So, hello everybody. Welcome to Investigators Roundtable, and our guest today is Michael Julian, CPI, PPS, CSP, and CEO, and you'll have to explain all those to us as we go.
Okay.
Michael is the owner of National Business Investigations, Inc., MPS Security and Protection, and a live active shooter survival training program. And from what I understand, Michael, you also have a couple books, a couple podcasts, and you seem to be an overall busy guy. So why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, introduce your business, and give us the inside scoop on who you are.
I will do that. Thank you very much, Amanda. I've been a PI and security professional pretty much my whole life. My father started our company in 1967 after doing some time in the Navy and then law enforcement. And so literally since I was born, I have been in this environment, either playing with my toys on the floor of his office back in Fullerton, California in the very early 70s. And then obviously it's what I'm doing today. The designations are certified professional investigator, personal protection specialist, and certified security professional.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And I love that story. So my kids have kind of grew up the same way now. And I know you have kids. Do you think your kids will take the torch, so to speak? Are you going to try to pass it on to them?
Well, actually, my son, he actually signed up for the Marine Corps before he even graduated high school. Did 5 years in the Marine Corps, mostly in DC, attached to the White House and the presidential travel detail. So
You must be proud. That's
I'm
awesome.
very proud. He's probably had more formal security and protection training than I've ever had in my too many years of life. He's now still in DC or Virginia, actually, just finished his associate's degree, and he's moving back next year to start his bachelor's program in business, which I never had any business training whatsoever, education. I just learned it by watching and reading. And then he'll come back out. Yeah, he'll be back out here, and then he will go back to work for me. And his intention is to take over the business one day and be third generation.
Oh, I love that. That's like my favorite story ever. That's what I'm trying to do over here. My kids are a lot younger though. So my daughter's 12, my son's 10. But like I said, they've been kind of around it. I don't see my daughter so much being interested in it. I think I don't know if I traumatized her, which is they watched me start the business, and listen, business is not for everyone, right? And she's much more of a play it safe kind of person. But my son is definitely my little protege. So that's a great path. And that's kind of similar to my path. I'm an Army combat veteran. I was in Iraq 2008, 2009. And I got home and got my business degree. So similar path. And it's a great path because discipline, obviously you get that from the military, the training, like you said, and then the business side of it, it translates over very well. It's been a good fit for me. So thank you for sharing that. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about your PI company, especially, and then maybe a little bit about the security stuff. I know, I guess from the name, we can tell that you kind of specialize in business investigations. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind?
Sure. Well, the PI company is National Business Investigations. That's actually the parent company. And then MPS Security and Protection is the security division of that company. My live active shooter program is a set aside. It's a standalone business. It used to be a product of the other company, but then I started its own entity. We do mostly corporate investigations, business stuff, insurance fraud. I've never done plaintiff's work, just because of being on the defense side of things. I've seen too many fraudulent plaintiffs, so it's not something I wanted to get into. And I don't do criminal investigations because there's other people out there that can defend criminals, but I couldn't in good conscience do that if I knew or felt strongly that whoever my client was guilty. So I just steered away from that. And we stay plenty busy enough doing civil litigation support and working for attorneys and business owners and other workplace investigations, sexual harassment, Title VII, like sexual harassment, retaliation, discrimination, that sort of thing.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad that you're one of my first guests on here because my business is kind of in a transitionary period. So we're out here in South Carolina, you're in California, totally different economy, totally different set of, I don't know, I guess,
Different world.
cases, just everything's a little different. But we're in actually Horry County, where I'm at, is the fastest growing area in the country right now. A lot of retirees move down here, but I've seen a really big shift to businesses coming down here as well. And so my business is in a little bit of a transitionary period as well, where I'm actually one exam away from being a certified fraud investigator, CFE. I don't think you had that one. Because I'm looking into more of the corporate stuff, like you said, the business stuff. And that's really where my heart is and my passion is helping small business owners, helping large corporations, fraud, anything to do with fraud, white collar crime, that sort of thing. Like you, I don't do any criminal defense stuff. Primarily right now, we're doing a lot of domestics, which also goes into the fraud. Everybody seems to lie on their financial decks when they get divorced or whatever. But yeah, so that's super interesting. And I'm so glad to be able to connect with you. And I'd love to, keep in contact with you. I guess so from these, let's limit it to business investigations, corporate investigations. What is the most interesting case that you worked on? Like what's the story you tell at parties? Because everybody always wants to know.
Well, I don't know that I'm famous for it, but the most famous case that I've ever worked was back in the 90s when all of these .com domains were being registered, and people would register them and sit on them like whatever .com and so forth, which were pretty smart people to think that far ahead. A client and now friend of mine, a guy named Gary Kremen, registered sex.com, match.com, this.com, that.com, and he just sat on them waiting for somebody to want to buy him. He was a Stanford grad and just very, very intelligent businessman. In the meantime, a guy named Stephen Michael Cohen from Lompoc Prison, in federal prison, wrote a letter to Network Solutions and said, yeah, my buddy Gary has gifted the sex.com domain over to me, so you can go ahead and just change that registration now. And they did it. Cohen then turned around, got out of prison, turned around and turned it into a portal, like an advertising portal for different pornographic websites. So he wasn't actually doing porn. Thank you so much. He wasn't actually doing porn. I got my morning coffee, thank God, for my wonderful assistant, Rain.
Oh yeah, you guys are what, 3 hours behind?
Yes, we are. It's 8:15. So he turned it into this $1 million a month advertising portal for porn sites.
Wow.
Well, my client found out about it and sued him in federal court and won. In the meantime, this guy had amassed a fortune and bought a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe and all kinds of stuff. But he was a career criminal and fraudster and not a generally nice guy. So the court ordered him not to move any funds or do anything with the money during the process, which of course he then did, transferred all the money out, trashed the house that he was going to lose to my client in Rancho Santa Fe, and disappeared. Gary hired me after law enforcement and I think 2 or 3 other PIs had failed to find him. And I just did what I was taught by my father. If you can't find somebody directly, start looking at the circles around them. So I started investigating the guy's associates. I found was still his wife, a Mexican national living in San Diego, did surveillance on her, followed her across the border down to this big, beautiful home in, what's it called? Right below Tijuana. There's this very affluent neighborhood. I can't remember what it's called.
Okay.
Set up surveillance, and sure enough, he came out and put the trash out and then got in his car and took off. And we got video of him. I took it back to my client. Now, this guy was now a fugitive from justice because he was ordered not to do certain things. He then did and then left the country, which he wasn't supposed to do. The marshal's office did this very clever little ploy to have their counterparts in Mexico say, hey, we need you to come to the, whatever they call it, immigration office here in Mexico to go over some paperwork. He showed up, they grabbed him and brought him home and put him back in prison. So that was, and since then there's been documentaries, and I've gone down to Mexico with news crews or whatever, documentary crews, and done stuff like that. So the sex.com, I think the sex.com was the first time that something virtual was treated like real property in court. So it was
Wow.
it was
That's really interesting. Good for you. Congratulations. That's a big deal.
thanks.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, that's hard to beat. So my next guest is going to have a tough act to follow. So this episode of the Investigators Roundtable is sponsored by ImmaculateMerch.com, merchandise inspired by life as a private investigator. As a way to say thank you, we are giving 20% off for podcast listeners with coupon code THANKYOU20. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy this podcast. So I guess, what do you like about the profession and what do you dislike about the profession? Like, just personally.
Well, one of the things I've always liked is I'm a bit ADD and I get restless easily and I get bored easily. Every case was a new challenge. Every case had, no matter what it was, whether it was theft or embezzlement or discrimination or insurance fraud or anything, it was a new case with new players and new challenges, new evidence to get, new reason for getting it, a new scenario to investigate. So I always liked that it was changing from day to day because, like I said, I get bored fairly easily.
Yeah, that's such an important thing for me as well, too. And I think a lot of PIs probably feel the same way, as far as we're not really 9-to-5ers in an office sort of people. So yeah, that's a great answer. It really is. And it really, I don't know that you could get that with many other professions. Is there anything you dislike about it?
I've never really thought about, well, sure. When I was my dad's surveillance manager and I was getting up at 3 and 4 in the morning, drive 2 hours through California traffic to sit on a house for 10 or 12 or 14 hours, and then drive back 2 hours in traffic, and then get 4 hours sleep. And, I was lucky. I built surveillance vans, so I always had room and I had a little porta potty, so I could actually,
That's awesome.
I could go to the bathroom. I could go number 1. I didn't go number 2 in the porta potty, but I could do that instead of using a big mouth Gatorade bottle or something like a lot of guys have to use when they're sitting in their cars. But
Yeah, don't tell my investigators this, because they'll be knocking on my door for a van next.
yeah, well, it's the way to go because you can move around and you're sitting up taller or there are other vehicles, so you can videotape and stuff like that. So that was it. I never really cared for domestic. I've probably done 10 domestics in my entire 36 years in this business, and maybe 20, I don't know. But I never liked the domestics because typically it's just, there's always drama and somebody's getting hurt and there's hurt feelings and your client wants to treat you like a therapist, and you're letting them know, hey, I'm charging by the hour here, so are you sure you want to keep telling me about your woes? So I was never big on that stuff because it was always, somebody was always a loser, if not both of them, and I didn't care for that. And I don't mean loser in a judgmental way. I mean, there was a lot of hurt feelings.
Right. No, that's so true. Family court is tough. We do a lot of family court. So we're actually an at-fault state here in South Carolina. I don't believe that's the case with California. So it really does impact the family court system when one party essentially needs to be found at fault. So, and I can totally agree with the therapist comment. We just moved into a new office and there's an actual therapist above us. So I'm like, hey, listen, upstairs, that's your girl.
Well,
Um,
I own my building, and I actually rent 3 of my units upstairs to therapists.
well,
So
there we go. And, and it's like,
always got a backup plan if we're having a bad day. We just run upstairs and cry on the couch.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that. What are your goals for your business? Now, you're very well established. This is a multi-generational business, which is awesome. I love hearing that. Family-run businesses are the best, in my opinion. But what are your goals and plans for the future? Like, what is the direction you're trying to take your company in?
Well, you know, we've been around for what, 56, 58 years. My son wants to take it over. The goal is to keep, I get offers weekly to buy my business because it's so established and been around forever and it's got a good reputation. But my goal is to keep it going. I mean, I can, even when I step back to either semi-retire or retire, which I'm hoping is fairly soon, I can still draw a paycheck because and keep the business going and alive for my son. But ultimately, when I'm out, it's up to my son. I believe, knowing him, he'll keep it going and probably try and pass it down to his kids one day. But
That's great.
we'll just keep cruising along. I want to say we're a little bit boutique. We don't take, there's a lot of stuff we turn down just because we don't want to be involved in that type of investigation. And we've got a pretty good name for ourselves. So we're lucky to be able to take what we want and not take what we want. And we've got clients that we've had for literally over 30 years. So
Right.
there's a little bit of a loyalty there. So we're just going to keep on trucking. And if someday my son decides to go in a different direction, that'll be his decision.
That's great. I love that. Now, if you don't mind, would you tell us a little bit about how the security fits into your PI work? Is it a totally separate set of clients, or do you provide security services to your PI clients as
Well,
well?
there's some crossover. And in California, I don't know how it is in other states. In California, you have to have 2 separate licenses.
Hmm.
The only time you can, and you can't provide security, if you're a PI, you can't provide security for, say, assets or things or property. You can provide personal protection to an existing client if it's in conjunction with an ongoing investigation. So let's say I'm doing a domestic, or now let's not use that. I'm doing an investigation for a business owner, and he and his partner are splitting, and we're investigating the other side, and now there's threats against my client, to hurt him because of what's going on. We can step in and do it. But otherwise, you need what's called a private patrol operator license to run security. And I love security. I grew up in my dad's shadow, which I'm okay with that. It was a big shadow and a lot of, big shoes to fill. But one thing that I was always very good, even though we did personal protection before, I've always been a very security minded person, head on a swivel, and sometimes to the point of hypervigilance. And I've always been good at it. So I've enjoyed the personal protection and maintaining a safe environment for a client type of thing. So that's actually dwarfed the PI side since I started. We did security, when I was much younger, when my father was alive, and then he passed and we didn't do a whole lot. And then it kind of I had an opportunity and I just blew it up, and it's 30 times bigger than the PI side now.
Really, really, that's interesting. And I see the way the world is going, and it does seem that that's a recession-proof business. Let's just put it that way. And the PI world is too, to a certain extent, depending on what you specialize in, right? Obviously, the worse the economy gets, the more fraud there is. The worse the economy gets, the more need there is for security. Who are your biggest security clients? Do you do any government contract work? Is it just corporations, private parties?
No, we've done government stuff. Some of our, Coca-Cola, Sutter Health, Neuralink, Fortune 100, 500 companies. It's just whoever needs us. because we've been around so long, and just people know who I am because of I've been either the president, like I was the president of the California Association of Licensed Investigators, and I've been on the board of the national and international PI and security associations. People just know me. And so every once in a while we'll get, hey, Mike, listen, do you do this type of thing, or can you handle this or whatever? So we get stuff out of nowhere from clients that we don't even know, just as a referral from other associates and so forth. So, Coca-Cola, we do strikes for them, and God, I can't even think. I mean, a lot of Boot Barn, all kinds of different companies.
Interesting. That's super cool. And I guess it kind of segues into my next question, and you've kind of already answered it, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but what is your best marketing strategy?
Well, for my active shooter program, because I created the Alive Active Shooter Survival Training Program in 2013 and launched it in 2014. Honestly, oddly enough, social media has been massive for me. My LinkedIn profile is pretty extensive, so we do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, all of the social media platforms. So people just kind of know me as the active shooter guy. So anytime anybody needs anything active shooter, they go, hey, I know this guy from wherever, LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or something. So we get a lot of work from there. But honestly, website and SEO is probably the best, because when you're looking for an active shooter guy and you type it in Google, I always pop up towards the top, because I've done a good job and paid a lot of money, frankly, to marketing company and social media people to make sure that happens. So at the end of the day, for me, because I've been doing it a long time, I think the website, SEO, and even organic searches have been really good.
Okay, that's actually a surprise. That's not what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say word of mouth and referrals.
Word of mouth
From
is
being established
word of
business.
mouth is, you know what though, and I gosh, I never really think about that as marketing, but it certainly is marketing. Probably the best marketing is word of mouth.
It is.
I just
Networking is my thing. I'm the networking queen.
and I do love to network. So I guess if you put it that way, probably direct referrals from other people and
Mhm.
existing clients that get a lot of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And then would you just tell us about, kind of going along with the marketing? I know you have a couple books and a couple podcasts, maybe. Would you just tell us about those briefly?
Well, okay. So if you're going to give me the opportunity to do a
Of
commercial, this
course,
is the
yes.
book I
I'm all
use.
about collaboration, not competition.
I
So if I
appreciate
could support somebody, you support me. It's
that.
great. It's a
Well,
win-win.
and to that point, let me tell you something, Amanda. I have never been the paranoid guy that's trying to hold everything so close to the vest because I think somebody's going to, steal it from me. I've had former employees leave and open their own companies and go after my clients, and my clients immediately call me and go, "What is this fool trying to do?" Because I don't
I
really
love
break.
that.
If you're doing a good job and you're reasonably priced, you're not giving anybody a reason to go any other direction. So, but my book, I've got, actually, this is my second book. It's the second edition of the first book. So I've got two books, but they're the same book. One's just new and improved, called 10 Minutes to Live, Surviving an Active Shooter Using Alive.
Okay.
It's an Amazon bestseller in 6 categories, because there's not a whole lot of books written on the topic. And I'm real proud of that. I wrote that in 2017, and then the second edition, I think in 2021 is when we set that out, and that's done very, very well. The podcast, I had just a podcast like this where I did everything via Zoom back in 2019, and then COVID hit and I dropped it. But I've just redone a new one, and this is actually kind of my passion project. It's more for me than advertising or anyone else. My new podcast is Down and Dirty with Michael Julian. And even though a lot of my guests, I've started out with friends, so I'm going to exhaust my friends list first, but I've got plenty of friends with the kind of stories I'm looking for. My podcast is specifically for people, to give people an opportunity to tell their story of adversity, discrimination, sexism, racism,
Oh,
sexual
listen,
abuse,
I'm your
physical,
girl. You got to have me on. I got
emotional
stories
abuse,
for days.
any of that stuff. And so I like, and for whatever reason, people feel comfortable telling me these stories. So I've had some guests on that had some pretty horrific stories, but the important part is not what they went through, it's what they got out of it and what they became after going through that. So I've got some unbelievably inspiring guests that told their stories and may still struggle with, some of the demons that come with obtaining or attaining stories like that, but it's made them who they are, and they've risen out of the ashes, and they're amazing human beings, amazing business people, technicians, just good people overall. And that, because I've got my own stories, and like we all do, and I want to give something to people that will inspire them to go, hey, you know what? It can be better, or he can do it, or she can do it, I can do it, or my life sucks it, and I thought about doing something really, really horrible to end the pain I'm living in. But people need to know that there is always, 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 no matter what, another way to go about things that can take them on a positive trajectory to become happy, healthy, and prosperous. And I want people to understand that.
That's amazing. I love that. And I think that is so important because, like you said, I mean, you can have all the mental health support in the world. We were just talking about therapy, joking around. But at the end of the day, somebody else going through some adversity and coming out of it is really there's no other replacement for that level of inspiration. And I think that's a really important project. So I'll have to check it out. You'll have to send me the link to your podcast. And what is the name of it?
Down and Dirty with Michael
Down and
Julian.
Dirty.
It's on
Okay,
all
perfect.
platforms. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple. It's everywhere.
Great, great. And you said we can get your book on Amazon. Is there another spot where you get more of the profits? Because I know Amazon.
Yeah. Go to my website and go
Okay.
to products and order the book there, because then I get about 80% of the profits, whereas I get 40% through Amazon.
Exactly. I'm always thinking strategically. I'm a business owner, right? What is your website, just so everybody can?
The investigations website is investigations-NBI for National Business Investigations. Investigations at NBI.com. Security is security-MPS. The story behind that is I called myself when I first started in 2003, fired up the security department or division as a separate standalone. It was called Minders Protective Services, and a minder is the kind of the term for bodyguard in Europe. So I thought I was being clever.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. I've never heard that.
Everyone kept reading it as Minders, and that drove me crazy. So I shortened it to MPS. So it's security-MPS.com. And the Alive Active Shooter program is www.activeshootersurvivaltraining.com.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. And I guess one of the last questions is going to be, what advice would you give somebody that's starting out, just starting in the business?
Well, I've given a lot of that advice, actually. When I was with the California Association of Licensed Investigators, I, being one other person, created a starting your PI business course that we would teach at all the conferences, and then evolved to different parts. If you're talking about PI, criminal justice degree is nice, but practical experience is better. If you want to be a PI, get a job working for a PI. Be prepared to do the absolute worst garbage crap jobs that they have. And that may be sitting in a surveillance van for 16 hours. It may be rummaging through, criminal and civil files at the courthouse for 8 hours. It could be serving subpoenas. Whatever it takes, if this is your chosen profession, you better be willing to do whatever it takes and work your way up, and never stop learning. Keep your eyes and your ears open and your mouth shut most of the time. When it comes to personal protection, you're gonna better have a good head on your shoulders. Have some common sense. Being book smart certainly doesn't hurt if you ever want to have an intelligent conversation with a client. Again, always be learning. Never shut your brain down. Keep your mouth shut, your eyes and your ears open. Never complain and never talk crap about your clients or your employer or your fellow agents, because as far as I'm concerned, that will get you a sad face next to your name, and I'll never hire you. As far as active shooter survival, I don't think anybody necessarily wants to get into that. It's a
That's a niche for sure.
It's a niche, and it can be a little dark. I love it because I have a story from a survivor that I taught in 2014, who was in the 2017 Las Vegas massacre. And she contacted me afterwards and said that she believes that me and my program saved her life. So that was a pretty profound moment in my life, and just wonderful, and totally ignited this passion inside me that I thought was dying after being in this industry for decades. I'm going to say what I would tell anybody for anything: hard work, listen, learn, have a really good work ethic, keep your head down and your mouth shut, and and do the work, and you'll become an excellent technician. Now, if you want to be a business person,
Oh, I'm so
so
glad you just made that distinction.
that's a whole nother entity, a whole nother thing. You could be the greatest technician in the world, but if you're not a good business person, you're probably not going to succeed. You could be a good technician and a really good business person, and you're probably going to succeed. So be a great technician and a great business person if you want to have your own company.
And you know what? In this industry, I have found that those two do not always go together. I would say more times than not, they don't go together. Usually, when I see a really good PI, they're kind of the do it yourself mentality, if that makes sense, the DIY, right? They are really good at what they do, but they're not so good at managing people because, they're the experts. So obviously, nobody can do it better than them. So they almost strangle their business. And this is something that I've had to deal with as well, transitioning from being self-employed technician really to running a business. And the skill set is not the same, at least in this industry. Some industries, I feel like it is. In this one, it is a little bit harder. And so you see these really good PIs that could get a lot of business and could expand, but don't because they're not interested, quite frankly, in managing a business. And then you see somebody who's really good at managing a business, but they're not really good at the technician side of things. So they don't know how to train people. So you're 100% right. You have to have that technician foundation before you expand. At least that's my opinion on it.
I would agree.
Yeah. So, and it is, I don't know, PIs are an interesting crowd. I would say uh, they're very diverse. A lot of them are not the most extroverted people you'll ever meet. They're really good at sitting in vans for long periods of time, not talking to anyone. I'm more extroverted. You seem to be more extroverted. And I think that's also important, when to make that distinction between, are you going to run a business or are you going to just be a self-employed PI or work for somebody else? So,
Yeah.
well, I think that's all we have. Is there anything you wanted to ask me specifically? This isn't scripted, so go right ahead. I'll answer to the best of my ability.
Well, I will tell you this. I love your podcast background. Is that virtual or real?
Oh, no, that's real. So I'm actually in my house right now. So this is my bookshelf in my house because we are under Hurricane whatever for Hurricane Debbie here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So yeah, hopefully I'm really happy we didn't lose power and there hasn't been anything dramatic during this episode, but it's been iffy all day. So we're hunkered down in the house. So yeah, that is my personal bookshelf.
Well, I
We're
like
not
it.
in my office. My office is about a mile and a half away, but we're hunkered down in the house today. So
Very cool. Well, I hope you guys are safe and that storm goes somewhere else.
yes, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you coming on and we will keep in touch. And if there's anybody else that wants to be on and be interviewed, send them my way.
I will do that. Thanks, Amanda.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye. That concludes this episode of Investigators Roundtable. If you're enjoying this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share. And information about myself and my guests can be found in the description box below. Once again, I'm your host, Amanda Appy from Immaculate Investigations, LLC, and thank you so much for watching.